My friend, we spend so much energy trying to figure out other people, trying to understand who they really are beneath the masks and performances they present to the world. We listen to their words, we observe their public behavior, we pay attention to their accomplishments and credentials. We note what they say about themselves and what others say about them. We collect information, form impressions, make judgments. Yet often we remain confused, uncertain, or worse, completely deceived about someone's true nature and character. We discover too late that the person we thought we knew, the person who presented such a convincing image, was actually someone quite different underneath. The friend who seemed so loyal betrays us. The partner who proclaimed endless love leaves without warning. The colleague who appeared so competent and trustworthy proves to be neither. The spiritual teacher who spoke so eloquently about consciousness turns out to be driven by ego and exploitation. How do we see clearly through the elaborate performances, the carefully constructed images, the practiced words and rehearsed behaviors that most people use to conceal their actual character? According to Jiddu Krishnamurti's profound observations of human nature over decades of intimate interaction with thousands of people across cultures and circumstances, there are really only two things you need to pay attention to if you want to see someone's true character with clarity and accuracy. Not dozens of factors to evaluate, not complex psychological profiles to construct, not years of careful observation to accumulate. Just two specific things that reveal with remarkable precision who someone actually is beneath all their presentations and performances. These two things cannot be faked over time, cannot be successfully performed for long periods, cannot be hidden from clear observation. They reveal the actual structure of consciousness operating in someone, the real motivations driving their behavior, the genuine quality of their being rather than the image they are trying to project. The first thing to pay attention to, and this is absolutely crucial, is how someone treats people who can do absolutely nothing for them. People who have no power or influence or resources that might benefit them in any way. Watch very carefully how they interact with servers in restaurants, with janitors and cleaning staff, with receptionists and assistants, with homeless people on the street, with animals, with anyone who occupies a position of less power, less status, less ability to help or harm them in their pursuit of whatever they are pursuing. Most people, if you observe closely and honestly, have a different persona, a different quality of behavior depending on who they are interacting with at any given moment. They are charming, respectful, attentive, kind to people who have power over them, people who can advance their career or social standing, people whose good opinion matters for their ambitions and goals. They carefully manage these important relationships, always showing their best face, their most appealing qualities. But watch what happens when these same people interact with someone who has no power, no status, no ability to advance or hinder their interests. The mask often drops, sometimes subtly, sometimes dramatically. The charm disappears, replaced by indifference or barely concealed contempt. The patience and attentiveness they showed to powerful people evaporates when dealing with service workers or subordinates. They become dismissive, rude, demanding, treating people as mere objects to serve their convenience rather than as human beings worthy of basic respect and consideration. They interrupt. They ignore. They fail to say please or thank you. They make unreasonable demands. They show irritation at the slightest inconvenience. Or more subtly, they simply become invisible to these people, looking through them rather than at them, acknowledging their existence only as functional objects rather than as conscious beings. This difference in behavior, this capacity to be charming and respectful to some people while being dismissive or cruel to others based purely on their utility and power, reveals something fundamental about character. It shows that the kindness, respect, and consideration they show to people who matter to them is not genuine kindness arising from basic human decency and empathy, but strategic behavior, calculated performance designed to gain something. Their niceness is transactional, conditional, a means to an end rather than an expression of who they actually are. When there is nothing to gain, when no one important is watching, when power dynamics allow them to reveal their true feelings without consequences, you see what is actually there beneath the performance. Entitlement, contempt, the fundamental belief that some people matter and others do not, based on their utility. In contrast, observe someone who treats everyone with the same basic quality of respect, consideration, and human decency, regardless of their status or power or ability to provide benefits. They are equally courteous to the CEO and the janitor, show the same patience and consideration to the powerful and the powerless, extend the same fundamental human recognition to everyone they encounter. They say please and thank you to service workers not as calculated politeness, but as natural expression of seeing them as human beings. They make eye contact. They notice people rather than looking through them. They treat small inconveniences with patience, whether dealing with their boss or someone bussing tables. They do not have different personas for different audiences because their behavior flows from something genuine rather than strategic. This consistency of behavior across all interactions, this refusal to treat people differently based on their power or utility, reveals genuine character. It shows that respect, kindness, and consideration arise from something intrinsic rather than being tools for gaining advantages. It demonstrates that they see all human beings as worthy of basic dignity and respect, not because of what those people can do for them, but simply because they are human. This is rare, my friend, because it requires something most people lack. Freedom from the ego's constant calculation of advantage, liberation from the compulsive need to manage image and position, genuine compassion that extends to all beings rather than selective niceness aimed at advancing self-interest. Pay attention to this first thing with clear eyes, and you will rarely be deceived about someone's true character. The person who is rude to waiters but charming to their boss will eventually treat you badly once they no longer need something from you, or once mistreating you becomes convenient for them. The person who speaks eloquently about love and compassion while treating people they consider beneath them with contempt has not understood what love and compassion actually are. The person who is kind only to those who can benefit them is not kind at all, but merely strategic. But the person who extends the same quality of basic human decency to everyone, who treats the powerless with the same respect they show the powerful, who does not have different personas for different audiences, is someone whose character has genuine depth and integrity. The second thing to pay attention to, and this is equally revealing and perhaps even more subtle, is how someone responds when they make mistakes, when they are wrong about something, when they cause harm through their actions or words, when they fail or disappoint others. This response reveals the actual structure of their ego and the degree of genuine self-awareness and maturity they possess. Most people, if you observe carefully, have tremendous difficulty admitting mistakes, acknowledging when they were wrong, taking responsibility for harm they have caused. Their ego cannot tolerate being wrong because they have identified their worth with being right, being competent, being above criticism. So when confronted with their mistakes or failures, they engage in elaborate defensive maneuvers. Watch what these people do when they make an obvious error or cause clear harm. They deny, they rationalize, they justify, they deflect responsibility. They claim they were misunderstood, that their intentions were good even if the results were bad, that circumstances beyond their control caused the problem, that others are actually to blame if you really examine the situation carefully. They become defensive, sometimes aggressively so, attacking those who point out their mistakes rather than looking honestly at what happened. They twist facts, rewrite history, gaslight others into questioning their own perceptions. They offer non-apologies that acknowledge no actual wrongdoing. "I'm sorry you feel that way," or "I'm sorry if anyone was offended," which are really ways of suggesting the problem is with others' perceptions rather than with their actions. Or they acknowledge mistakes only minimally, only when absolutely forced to, offering the smallest possible admission while continuing to justify and defend themselves. They cannot say simply and directly, I was wrong. I made a mistake. I caused harm. I take full responsibility. These words seem almost impossible for them to speak because their sense of self, their ego structure, cannot accommodate being genuinely wrong or responsible for harm. Their identity depends on being right, competent, blameless, always having good intentions even when outcomes are terrible. Admitting genuine error, taking clear responsibility, acknowledging harm without justification or excuse, feels to them like death, like fundamental threat to their existence. This inability to acknowledge mistakes and take responsibility reveals profound immaturity of consciousness. It shows that the person is identified completely with their ego, their self-image, their need to be seen in a particular way. It demonstrates lack of genuine self-awareness, because true self-awareness includes clear seeing of one's limitations, errors, and capacity to cause harm. It indicates they have not done the inner work necessary to separate their worth as a human being from their actions and behaviors. So every mistake feels like proof of fundamental worthlessness rather than simply information about what happened. And practically, it means they cannot learn from mistakes, cannot grow from errors, cannot develop wisdom through facing their own limitations, because they are too busy defending against seeing those limitations clearly. In contrast, observe someone who can acknowledge mistakes simply and directly without elaborate justification or defense. When they realize they were wrong about something, they can say clearly, "I was wrong about that." When they cause harm through their actions or words, even unintentionally, they can acknowledge it. "I caused you harm, and I take responsibility for that." When they fail at something or disappoint others, they can admit it without drowning in shame or immediately trying to prove they are actually still competent and valuable. They can apologize genuinely, not as strategic manipulation to get back in good graces, but as authentic acknowledgement of harm caused and genuine regret for having caused it. This ability to acknowledge error, admit wrongness, take responsibility for harm, and apologize genuinely reveals a completely different structure of consciousness. It shows that they are not entirely identified with their ego, that their worth as a human being does not depend on always being right or appearing competent or maintaining a particular image. It demonstrates genuine self-awareness, the capacity to see themselves clearly, including their limitations and their capacity to cause harm. It indicates they have done sufficient inner work to separate who they are fundamentally from what they do or fail to do in any particular situation. And practically, it means they can actually learn from mistakes, can grow from errors, can develop wisdom through honestly facing their own limitations and working with them. Even more revealing is what they do after acknowledging mistakes and taking responsibility. Do they actually change their behavior based on what they have learned? Do they make genuine amends when possible? Do they do the work of understanding why they made the mistake so they can avoid repeating it? Or do they acknowledge mistakes superficially but continue the same patterns unchanged? The person of genuine character not only admits errors but actually learns from them, changes based on them, grows through them. They use mistakes as opportunities for deeper self-understanding and behavioral change rather than as threats to their ego that must be defended against. These two things, how someone treats people who can do nothing for them and how they respond to their own mistakes and failures, reveal character with remarkable clarity because they bypass all the conscious image management and strategic behavior that most people engage in constantly. You cannot successfully fake treating powerless people well over extended time if you fundamentally see them as objects rather than humans. The mask will slip in unguarded moments, in times of stress, in situations where no one important is watching. You cannot successfully fake the ability to acknowledge mistakes and take responsibility if your ego cannot tolerate being wrong. Eventually, you will be caught in denial, defensiveness, or blame shifting, when confronted with clear error or harm you have caused. Pay attention to these two things with clear, unprejudiced observation, and you will save yourself tremendous suffering from misjudging people, from being deceived by convincing performances, from investing trust and energy in relationships with people whose character cannot support genuine connection. You will see clearly that the person who speaks eloquently about consciousness and compassion while treating service workers with contempt and never admitting mistakes has understood nothing real despite all their spiritual vocabulary. You will recognize that the person who may lack polish and sophistication but treats everyone with basic decency and can acknowledge their errors with simple honesty has genuine character and integrity. You will understand that character is not about eloquence or charisma or confidence or success or any of the surface qualities we often mistake for depth. Character is about how consciousness actually operates when no one important is watching and when the ego is challenged by its own limitations. These moments reveal truth because they bypass the performing self that most people present to the world. They show what is actually there beneath the presentations and performances, the real structure of consciousness operating in someone, the genuine quality of their being. But observe also, my friend, and this is crucial, that in paying attention to these two things in others, you inevitably must face them in yourself. How do you treat people who have no power over you, who can do nothing to advance your interests? Are you consistently respectful and considerate across all interactions, or do you have different personas for different audiences based on what you can gain? How do you respond when you make mistakes, when you are wrong, when you cause harm? Can you acknowledge these things simply and directly, or do you defend, rationalize, justify, deflect? Do you actually learn from mistakes and change your behavior, or do you repeat the same patterns while making superficial acknowledgments? This inquiry into your own character is more important than judging others, because the clarity with which you see others depends entirely on the clarity with which you see yourself. If you are blind to your own patterns of treating people differently based on their utility, if you cannot face your own difficulty with acknowledging mistakes and taking responsibility, you will not be able to see these patterns clearly in others. Your own unconsciousness will create blind spots in your perception of others' character. But as you develop genuine self-awareness, as you work with your own ego structure and see clearly your own patterns and limitations, your ability to perceive others accurately improves naturally because you are no longer projecting your own unconscious patterns onto them. So these two things serve a dual purpose. They are precise tools for seeing others' true character clearly, and they are mirrors for examining your own character honestly. Use them both ways, and you develop the rare combination of clear seeing of others and genuine self-knowledge that makes authentic relationship possible. You stop being deceived by performances and presentations, your own and others. You begin to see what is actually there, in yourself and in others, beneath all the masks and strategic behaviors that usually obscure truth. And in this clear seeing, you discover that authentic relationship, genuine trust, real connection become possible in a way they never can be when everyone is performing and no one is seeing clearly.